So welcome, folks. Welcome to another Brown Bag Lunch, our last one for the year. My name is Tristan, and I'm the community lead at Impact Hub Ottawa. And to get us started off with today's event, I would just like to acknowledge, as we always do, that I myself am a settler on this land, and our Impact Hub Ottawa office sits on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. Naturally, recognizing the legacy of colonialism means accepting that it still fundamentally impacts the lives of many First Nations people living across Canada today. And much work still needs to be done to achieve reconciliation. Obviously, today's event is centered around mental health, and I was doing some research, and frankly, mental health issues have been very prevalent throughout Indigenous communities around the country over the past couple of years. I wanted to spotlight a report from StatsCan that found that in Indigenous communities, people who were already struggling with mental health, 6 out of 10 Indigenous people who were already struggling with mental health said that their symptoms had worsened during the pandemic. So this is something to obviously just keep aware of, and with all of us as we have these important conversations around mental health. And so in all the events that we do, we always try to practice respect and acknowledgement for Canada's First People. And it's obviously important to recognize that, the first step of reconciliation is really creating a space where we can listen, we can learn, and also where possible, reach out to local First Nations communities, open pathways for dialogues around some of the important projects that we're all doing. So moving on to a couple of housekeeping notes. As I'd mentioned, this meeting is going to be recorded today. If you'd like to update your Zoom with your preferred, your pronouns rather, and organization or business you're from, we may take a couple of screenshots for social media, and of course, joining with video is totally optional. I also wanted to take a moment to chat a little bit about Impact Hub Ottawa. So Impact Hub Ottawa is a community and co-working space based in downtown Ottawa, 123 Slater Street. We are a space that tries to inspire, connect, and enable people to take action for a more just and sustainable world. Obviously, for those who need that sense of community, whether online or in person, we have virtual memberships as well as co-working memberships for people who would like to just to help out with that work-life balance, get out of the home, work in a productive environment. We also have a bunch of event and meeting space that is available for members and also people of our external community. Anyone who needs that space, it is available for you. And so with no further ado, I would like to pass on the mic to Kate Tenenhouse, who is the coordinator for the Gen Next Advocate Program. She's going to tell us a little bit about Gen Next East Ontario and also introduce our speaker for today's event. Hi, Kate.
Hi, Tristan. Thank you so much. Everyone can hear me okay? Show me a thumbs up, you guys. Awesome. Yes, thank you so much for inviting us to co-host with you this Brown Bag Lunch. We love partnering with Impact Hub Ottawa. Before I begin, there are some important reminders I wanted to mention as well. As part of this experience today, you will hear some stories from people who have personal challenges they have had to deal with or overcome, such as mental health challenges, suicide, and other difficult topics. And it is perfectly normal to have strong feelings about the stories you hear today. If you find yourself upset or troubled by what you're hearing, please know you can step aside at any time. Our staff will share some resources in the chat as well. And as Tristan already mentioned, we will be recording this event and content will be used for future promotional purposes. And for those who don't wish to be featured in the recording, no problem at all. Just please feel free to turn your video off. Now, some of you may know about Gen Next East Ontario, but for those that don't, I'm here to give you a short overview of who we are and what we do. So powered by United Way East Ontario, Gen Next is a social impact movement for the next generation of philanthropists. We're passionate about helping others, we lead with our hearts, and we make a difference with our actions. We work with local partners across Prescott Russell, Ottawa, Lanark, and Renfrew counties to address the most pressing issues in our region, advocate for change, and fundraise for support. So whether you're a local activist or looking to get involved with your community for the first time, GenNext is where you can connect with people and organizations who want to make a difference through events like this one. I'm going to share my screen with you guys. Yeah, so that's us, GenNext. And I'm just going to bring us to this slide. So yes, connect with people and organizations who want to make a difference through events like this one. We also help people learn about the unique challenges in our region and what you can do to make a meaningful, lasting impact. And we support your community. Together with our supporters, we rally behind 4 causes that are currently affecting the most vulnerable people in our region. That's mental health, youth homelessness, diversity and inclusion, and equitable employment. Today, we're talking about mental health. When someone's mental health is compromised, it can negatively affect all aspects of their life, from education and career to relationships and overall well-being. Without timely support, people facing mental health challenges are at greater risk of finding themselves in harmful or dangerous situations. Most of us know someone who has experienced a moment of crisis before, and no one should have to go through that alone. So when you join the GenNext movement, you're supporting the work we do with our partners, and that includes enabling crisis lines that offer immediate emotional support and coping strategies, delivering culturally appropriate, affordable, and timely counseling programs, expanding peer support groups and suicide prevention initiatives, and much more. We'll put a link, if we haven't already, to our GenNext cause page for mental health, so you can learn more about the work that we do on this issue. One of the ways you can break the stigma around mental health is by starting a conversation. And that's why we're here today. It's my pleasure to welcome our guest speaker, Ryan Forsyth, who will share his own mental health story and talk more about why it's so important to encourage an open dialogue on this topic. Ryan is an award-winning mental health speaker and advocate, host of the Life in Red podcast, an unsinkable community champion, and promotions coordinator for Jump 106.9 and Boom 99.7. He is passionate about helping people open up about their mental health and redefining a healthier version of masculinity. Please drop a message in the chat and help me give a very warm welcome. Over to you, Ryan.
Thank you, Kate, and thank you all for attending. I see some names I recognize and some names I don't. So for those of you who don't know me, again, yeah, my name is Ryan. I'm going to share my screen here, which is going to say the exact same thing. Can someone give me a thumbs up just to make sure they see? Excellent. It's my thing. So you got the bio. Here's what I look like on another day. You can see some photos of me with some celebrities. And what I usually like to start with this conversation is when you look at my face, besides making the exact same smile and pointing at all of these people, I also want to ask you what kind of commonalities that you kind of see in this. You probably see a happy person, or what you perceive, someone who has a very exciting life. But what I also like to point out in this, in all these photos where I look super happy, I was struggling with mental illness, depression, anxiety, and suicidal ideation. So even though things look great on social media and pictures, that doesn't always tell the full story. So today, what I'm going to be talking about, I'm going to share how this all kind of started and my story of mental illness and trying to overcome it, why it's important to talk about your mental health, how you can support yourself. A lot of us think about supporting others when they're struggling, and we're going to talk about that too. But I also want to talk about how we can support ourselves in times of whether it's crisis, struggle, or just some days that you feel down. And I think it's important to acknowledge before I start this conversation is yesterday was an extremely bad day for me mental health wise. So as I give you this presentation, my headspace isn't the best right now. And I think it's important in this conversation of being open and honest that I acknowledge that with you right off the bat. So before we start here, a couple things I'd like to point out. I am not perfect. Just because I'm here with a microphone giving a presentation on mental health does not mean I claim to be perfect. I have made plenty of mistakes in my life. I have done things I regret and I am not proud of. And, you know, I just continue to learn and grow, but I don't claim up to be here and have all the answers for you. I'm not here to tell you what to think or believe. You can make those choices on your own, but I'm just going to share my experiences and my story and how that led to where I am today. I don't speak on behalf of anyone but myself, especially when I talk about men's mental health. Um, I can only share my own story. So as I talk about mental health, I absolutely recognize that everyone has their own individual and unique experience and story with mental illness and mental health. So I'm only speaking for myself. I'm not an expert. I only have lived experience, and I have had plenty of conversations with other advocates and people who do research this, but I am not myself a scientist or a researcher of mental illness. Many of these ideas are evolving in real time. So sometimes when I give a presentation, some things can change as I'm presented with new information or experiences. So nothing is ever set in stone really, as we as humans and myself continue to evolve. And then me talking about my mental health or referencing men's mental health is not to invalidate anybody other's experiences or struggles. Everybody has unique stories and struggles, but when I speak, I'm speaking to my own and some common themes that I've come across talking with other speakers, other advocates, and other people with lived experience. So I'm going to go quickly take us through my story. I do have my timer going because I do want to leave room for questions if anyone has it. But my mental health and illness story starts when I was 12 and 14. And we're not talking about, you know, the struggle of having that awful haircut. I don't know what I was thinking. But, you know, I was the kid. I played sports. I had plenty of friends. I was a popular kid in high school. You know, I don't have that prototypical story of, you know, something awful happening to you as a young person, and then, you know, moving on with the rest of your life, trying to overcome trauma. I'm from a white upper middle class family. I didn't know struggle really, but that doesn't invalidate the things that I went through. You know, everyone has their unique story, and you don't have to experience trauma or, you know, some sort of adversity in your life to experience these types of things. When it started with panic attacks, and it usually centered around the thought that one day I had to die. So I'd be going to sleep, and you know, your mind gets racing, and you start to realize, oh, one day I have no choice but to die. And that's when panic attacks would start happening. And I had no clue what they were, but basically what would happen is, you know, when you try to take that nice deep breath and it kind of like relieves that pressure in your stomach, and you're like, oh, feel good, feel relaxed. I couldn't do that. And as I tried to do it more and more, I started to accelerate my breath. My heart started to go faster and start to sweat. And I'm like, am I having a heart attack right now? Am I about to die right now? And that's how the panic attack would start for me. And, you know, I'd run to the bathroom and splash water on my face or try to, you know, calm myself down. And eventually, you know, it would. But because I didn't know what was happening. And even, I mean, this was 15, 20 years ago. The conversation about this was non-existent. So I didn't know it was really something to worry about. In retrospect, should I have told my parents this was happening? Probably, but I didn't. It would just happen periodically from time to time. And, you know, I'd move on with my life. So that would kind of happen preteens, early teenager years as I went into high school. Here's me, same face, just a little fresher, a little more babyish. But 16 and 17 is kind of the year I mark as like where the depression started to set in. And what ended up happening is I went through a breakup where the girl, I don't know if you all remember being young, but your first partner, you're like, oh, we're going to get married. We're going to have tons of kids. Everything's going to be great. And then she cheated on me and started dating someone else. And I was heartbroken and basically locked myself in a room for a summer playing World of Warcraft, listening to like extreme, like heavy metal music. You know, I think at the time, I think it was like, oh, he's sad because of his breakup, which is a logical response. But that feeling never went away fully. And again, this was 15 years ago. No one was talking about mental health or mental illness or depression. Like it was just very silent. So, you know, I didn't really know what to think or what to do. And so I just kind of went along that summer, went into, you know, grade 12 and into my college years, kind of experienced these things. And an intense feeling of loneliness, an intense feeling of kind of like this me against the world type feeling. The suicidal ideation wasn't there yet, but that was kind of like the beginning of the depression. And I carried that into the next couple of years without telling really a soul that I was feeling that way. And if anyone knew me in high school, I was like Mr. Chatterbox, class clown, trying to make people laugh. And I think you hear so many times in the story of, someone attempting to take their own life or being successful. I think that's a common theme. People always say, "Oh, I never knew they were so happy. They were always smiling and laughing." And I think for me, it was a mask. It was definitely a mask trying to not let anybody know I was feeling that way. So flash forward to 21, excuse me. Here I am, a successful radio broadcasting graduate, graduating top of my class, winning awards. I got a job right out of school doing exactly what I wanted to do, working in radio. And as I talked about all those internal factors that were happening, more progressed once I left college. All the friends I grew up with, kind of, we all went our separate ways. Life isn't the same anymore. You don't do the same things you did growing up. So moving back to your hometown and trying to rediscover yourself as an adult is challenging for a lot of people. There's no secret in that. I was also in a relationship that I was extremely comfy in, but wasn't happy in, and I wasn't doing anything about it or communicating any of my feelings or trying to make anything better. That job I referenced, I went in for the interview and they asked me what my greatest weakness was. And I was honest, I was like, talking on the phone. I cannot talk on the phone. I like the anxiety. I didn't know it was called anxiety. I just said I was nervous, but it makes me extremely nervous. And lo and behold, they were, when they offered me a job, they're like, you can basically be a telemarketer for us. And I was like, excellent, challenge accepted, let's go. And every morning before I went to do that job, I would throw up in the bathroom. I was sick. I couldn't eat anything. Like, the anxiety was just so overwhelming for me. I wasn't telling anybody this. It was all to myself. All those things I mentioned before, the external factors now combining themselves and including a long drive to where I had to work. I made the decision that I could no longer live like this. It was too overwhelming, and I felt like a burden to every single person that I know. And I made the decision to try to end my life. So when I did that, I realized afterwards, after unsuccessful, that I needed help. And so I went to my parents, and I didn't tell them this, but I said, hey, like, I'm not feeling good. I didn't want to bring the embarrassment or the shame that I had around this incident to my parents. But I was like, in my head, I was like, okay, if I'm here, like, I can't live anymore like this. I need some help. And so I went to the doctor, I got put on medication, did some therapy, and things slowly got better. I left that job and decided to go back to school, to university. And, again, starting to feel better, ups and downs, of course, but we started to make some progress. So flash forward to age 23. So as I mentioned, lots of ebbs and flows, and I still wasn't really talking about it out loud to the people in my life. I sort of to my parents, sort of to my doctor. I stopped going to therapy. I got a job again in radio, and school was going well. And I was just perusing Twitter one day, and it was a Bell Let's Talk day, and it was 2015. And I was just got really inspired by some of the stories that I was reading from prominent figures in the media, other people, just random people I was coming across. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna share a little bit about my story. So this is kind of like the tweets that I did. This was also stupidly the first time I talked about my suicide to anybody, and I chose to do that on social media, which was a very poor decision because that shocked my parents and shocked every single person that I knew. So in retrospect, not a good choice, but it was in the moment. But what happened with this particular set of tweets? is it went sort of viral. Like it got a lot of retweets and likes. And what happened is so many people reached out to me. People my friends, my family, coworkers, of course, people I like barely knew, like that I knew them in high school, but I didn't really expect them to care. And then total strangers were reaching out and not only offering support, but they were also offering, their own stories, their own kind of similarities with the things that I was struggling with. And then complete strangers were, sharing their life story with me. And I got really inspired that day because I realized by me just being open really made an impact on a lot of people I care about, and a lot of people that, were telling me that it did help. So once I made that realization, that's when I sort of shared more and more on social media. I wasn't quite at the public level yet, but I just became very honest with who I was and what I was feeling. So if I was going through bad times, I was very vocal and open and honest about that. And that mixed in with, me sharing the pictures with the celebrities. Everyone's like, oh, wow, Ryan has such an exciting life. And I was contrasting that with, today really struggling or whatever was going on in my life. So that kind of started the advocacy route. Flash forward a couple more years. So this was 2018. Here I am talking about mental health. Things are good. I'm in a career now. I have a full-time job, salary, everything's sort of going well, but things still weren't sitting right in my mind for a lot of things. And I was going through like a really hard time at work. And people notice when you're not being your happy-go-lucky self, especially when that's the person you kind of portray, I am generally like that openly to people. My boss called me into the office one day and asked me, what's up, what's going on? And I'm like, try to hide it. I'm like, what are you talking about? There's nothing happening. I'm fine. Everything's good. Still tired. Didn't buy it and asked me again. I was like, okay, do you really want to know? Do you really want to know everything that's going on? And she said yes. So I like word bomb, like just tell her everything. And she's sitting there taken very back, but very encouraging and supportive, which I know not a lot of people are as fortunate sometimes in the workplace, but thankfully I was. And I was going to, that same day, I was about to drive to Toronto for a young leadership course I was in at work. And we kind of left it like, what's going to make you feel better? What can we do to help? And I was like, I don't know. I have no clue, but I'm about to embark on this 4-hour, 8-hour drive there and back. Let me think about it. I'll take the weekend. I'll come back to you next week and we'll see if we can make some solutions. So on that drive and in that point in my life, I was single, and both these radio stations that I work for target women. So kind of driving, I'm like, what attracts women? What impresses women? What do women enjoy? And I was like, dogs. Women love dogs. I know that now. So how can I combine this knowledge that I have and benefiting the radio stations and doing something that I really want to do? It's helping mental health, because as we know, and as we encourage people to seek help, reach out for help, they sometimes can't find it. The system isn't funded the way it should be. And so sometimes that relies on us, and me having the vessel of 2 radio stations with hundreds of thousands of listeners in a city of 1 million people. How can I use my job in this vessel to, push my personal things forward about helping people and making myself feel better at work, making a contribution in the community, but how can it benefit like everyone involved? So I took the idea of like therapy dogs that, come to students and exams and airports and all that. And I was like, how can we make this work? And the original idea was, we're going to get a bunch of dogs. We're going to put them on like an RV and we're going to brand it. And we're going to drive it all around the city. And then I found out that like no RV company was like, you want dogs in our RV, that we have to set like, no. And I was like, darn. So what we ended up doing is just, we set up 5 locations across Ottawa. We went to City Hall, Ben Franklin Place, and we partnered with our pals here at Pet Value. And we set up both stations, made it a big thing. And we got dogs from Sit With Me Shelter Dog Rescue. So they were adoptable rescue dogs. And the idea was to bring them on site people make a donation of whatever they liked. And we also brought Do It for Darren on site, because that's a charity I really believe in. As a hockey player, that really affected me when Darren Richardson took her life. And I believe in that mission so much because I believe we need to target young people and teens to give them the resources and the tools they need. So when they reach, my age of 21, when the mental illness really starts to manifest for a lot of different individuals, like they already kind of know to talk about it. They have the tools, they know where to go, they know the points of contact. So I was like, I want to support them. So they were on site. We split the donations 50-50. And we ended up raising a little over $12,000, $13,000 in 2 years. Unfortunately, it's been cut because of this stupid pandemic for the last 2 years. But hopefully, once the world goes back to normal, we'll bring that back. But one day at one of the events, one of the organizers from DIFD at the time was asking me, why did you put this together? Why did you do that? And I was just kind of sharing the story that I just shared with you all. And they were like, we have this program. It's called the Is It Just Me program. And it's funded by DIFD. And we have personal speakers on this day with clinicians and scientists. And we talk about mental health. And we have trouble finding men to share their story. Women will share their story publicly, but we don't have a lot of men. Would you be interested? And after all this years of advocating on social media, I was like, yes, this is exactly what I want to do. I want to help people. I want to give them a perspective that, you don't have to go through all this kind of trauma. And again, all the things that happen in people's lives to experience mental health struggle or mental illness. And so that's what kind of started this public speaking journey of mine. I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the podcast, because that's also been a huge part of my advocacy. So Life in Red, it's a podcast, it's a guest-centered podcast. So it's not all about mental health. But obviously my network and all that, there's a lot of people who come on and share their stories, or I have researchers at the Royal. I know a few people who have been on the podcast are here today. But it's just an open, honest and conversation about things that they went through. And through this journey, I've learned so much more about mental illness and mental health than I could ever have imagined. I have here Chris Cull, who, went through addiction with opioids. My friend Maria, who battles borderline personality disorder and addiction. My friend Victor, who has dissociative identity disorder, or formerly known as multiple personalities. And to have these open and frank conversations about, we talk about mental illness a lot, but it's depression, it's anxiety, right? Like the lighter ones, the public is like, we're okay with talking about this, but we don't want to go too deep. I'm like, no, things are going on and people are really struggling, and let's learn about that. Let's talk about that and hear it right from people who've been with it through their whole life. So it's been an incredible journey, a learning experience for me. And I've learned so much from people like this who you see on the screen and others who've been on this podcast. So then we get into the public speaking. I've been involved here. I've done TV interviews. I've been involved with Unsinkable, which is a community resource and mental health website and content company, Made for Millions. And I really believe in sharing my story, because I think it's a story that resonates with a lot of people. I know I'm not alone in the things I think about, the things that I feel. And especially as a man, I think it's super important that I get up on stage and make myself vulnerable, just to show others that it's okay. I don't expect everyone to share their life as intimately and detailed as I do. But if, I can talk about all this and someone can just say, hey, I'm struggling to somebody, that's the ultimate goal for me. COVID, I couldn't talk about mental health if we didn't talk about through COVID. Obviously, we all know mental illness and mental health struggle has been accelerated through the pandemic for everybody, kids especially, but we've all been struggling. It's a hard time, and it's important to recognize that. And I'm no different. And armed with all the knowledge and tools that I had at the beginning of the pandemic, I went to the worst place I have ever been since I was 21. I was awful. So even me giving public speeches, everything, I was struggling, and it was bad. On top of that, my partner, who I was dating for a year and a half, broke up with me a couple months in. And so I was left at the bottom of where I could be. And I had to find a way to pick myself up without being able to see anybody. That was the hardest part. So through this, I'm happy to say I've honestly come out on the other end, thankfully, probably the healthiest I've ever been. And there's a few ways that I learned to do this. I acknowledged how I was feeling. I sat with every emotion that I was feeling and thought it through, went to therapy, talked with my therapist about it, and really, I couldn't go out and talk to anybody. I couldn't go party away my feelings. Like I was alone outside of my family and a few friends. I couldn't do anything. So here's some things that really brought me back to this level of enjoyment. So do things you enjoy. I started going outside. I started playing basketball again. I started to, I make this joke, but The Greatest Showman, the musical, was probably one of the best things to ever happen to me because I heard that soundtrack and it ignited this fire in me. I was like, I love this soundtrack so much. I was like walking down the street, like singing and dancing. I just didn't care. And I was like, I don't care anymore. I really don't care what people think. I'm just going to embrace who I am. And like, it sounds so funny that this Disney movie did that, but it did. And then I started embracing all the things that I love that maybe I didn't embrace fully because whether it's toxic masculinity or whether it's judgment or shame, I just stopped caring. Listening, learning, and reflecting. Obviously, with the pandemic, with vaccines, we went through George Floyd, we went through the residential school crisis. Like there's been a lot this past 2 years. And I've really listened, I've really tried to learn, and I've really reflected on what everything means. And I think that's made me come out as a healthier person. And I'm able to navigate the weight of the world a lot better because I'm constantly just trying to ground myself and just listen to everybody. Put in the work. There's no secret. Mental health is work. Improving your mental health is work. It does not come easy. I don't know how many people try this, but mindfulness, gratitude, journaling. I mean, it's studied science. I know some people think it's like woo-woo or whatever, but it really works. And it puts you in a more positive mind frame going forward. And of course, self-care, exercise, sleep, eating healthy, connecting with people, nature, all those things that, are on the hierarchy of our needs. It's so important to go into that. And, you don't have to love everything. I don't really like meditating. So I don't do it. But, the things that I do enjoy, I love going to the gym. I love sleeping. So I do that. And I think it's really important. And this is just a quote that I like to give. It's treat yourself like someone you care about, right? We're always trying to take care of our loved ones and our friends and family, but we never treat ourselves the same way that we treat other people. We're a harsher critic. We would neglect ourselves for other people. Like we have to lean into this idea that we are worthy of our love and our own care. So here's some more things that help me. I'm very routine based, and that's what made the pandemic beginning very hard for me. I eat the same things mostly every day. I make my bed in the morning. I generally do the same tasks every single day just to, right, if I start to fall off the horse and start to struggle, I'm like, no, I still know I do these things because I just do them every day. So it just kind of helps me keep moving because I'm one of those people that I'm terrified that if I lie in bed for a day, that I'm not going to get back up and I'm going to lose all that momentum. So I just try to keep myself going that way. Therapy and talking about mental health openly. It is honestly like a weight off your shoulders. And you talk to anybody who shares their story publicly, talking about it, just acknowledging it openly will take that weight off. It doesn't fix it, but like you stop carrying the weight of the world around with you. And then when you connect with other folks who share their story or are also open, it is an incredibly inspiring and an intimate experience of sharing the exchange and the similarities that you have or the differences about how you struggle. It is such an invigorating experience. And I'm so thankful to people who've shared their story with me, and I've shared my story with them, because it just makes me feel so much more human and alive. Again, getting outside, walks. I bought a bike last year. I started biking. I played basketball at the school down the street. Started going camping. getting outside, the sunshine, connecting with nature, such a good experience. Again, exercise, excuse me, very good for me. I love going. And I was someone who hated going to the gym. The only reason I started was try to get girls to like me, because I was a little bit, a little overweight, and that was my mindset. And now I'm like, oh, I just want to go. So I never loved doing it. But also important to note that exercise isn't going to the gym and lifting heavy weights or going for an hour run. It's a walk. It's it's some dancing. It's whatever you can do to just move your body a little bit for a couple points in the day or at one time. But it doesn't have to be this super intense experience either, right? Gardening, shoveling snow can be something you just enjoy that just gets your body moving. Connection. Social media, as much of a dumpster fire as it is, it's changed my life since sharing that tweet on Twitter, and just continuing to be who I am on social media. I have connected with so many incredible folks. I can just, like, lifelong friends, some that I've never even met in person because I live in different parts of the world. It's ridiculous, but there's as much as there's trolls and bad community, there is like a wholesome, amazing community of people. And I'm not saying you have to share your mental illness or mental health struggles on social media, but even just connecting with people who are being authentic and open, it's a great opportunity if you might feel alone. Mindfulness, taking time to be present, reflecting. If I get a bad email, taking the time and walking away for a minute to think about it, right? Not overreacting, practicing stoicism, just being in the moment instead of letting things take over you. It's practice. It doesn't come easy, and I don't always succeed, but it's an ongoing practice I like to do, and it's important for me. CBD oil. Now, I'm not a scientist. I'm not a health practitioner. So, like, take this with a grain of salt. But for me, I started taking CBD oil last summer, and it has done wonders for my anxiety. Like, it honestly, but before giving a speech, like, I'd be sitting here and like my hands shaking and blah, 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 but now it's like, doesn't make me numb, which is great. But it also, I'm able to do things a lot more, and I don't worry as much. I don't get that pit in my stomach where I'm always worried about something. So anyway, that's just a personal anecdotal response to it, but it's mine. And my family and friends. As you can see, I have a very large family. I have 5 adopted siblings and 2 brothers. So I go home every Sunday. I love seeing them. My sisters are probably like 2 of my best friends. It's like being a fun uncle. But I love my family. I love my friends. Some of you here today, they're there for me. They support me. We can talk about anything. We can go months or years without talking or seeing each other and pick up right after where we left off. So I'd be nothing without my family and my friends. Being mindful of time here, so we have time for questions, but why is it important to talk? Why is it important to be vulnerable? And why is it important to ask for help? So there's no shame in asking for help, especially as a man. A lot of people seem to think that there is a weakness, that you can't handle life, or that you're a snowflake because you've asked for help. Strength. Asking for help is a strength, because you are admitting that you need help. You are admitting that you can't do it on your own. And that takes a lot of strength to admit that to another person. I mentioned this before, but talking about it, whether it's with your friends, your family, peer support, a stranger on the internet, a therapist. I have this quote here: you don't have to tell everyone, you just need to tell someone. It releases the weight. It frees your mind. It can lead to solutions. If you're sitting in your head wondering, should I do this? Should I do that? Talking to someone objectively who really knows how to understand and listen, might lead, they might not even have to say anything. It can lead to a solution in your own head. It's so important to acknowledge what you're going through and what you're thinking, because it's a cliche, but you're not alone in thinking it. I don't think there's a single unique idea that out there. There's someone else in the world thinking the exact same thing you are. To be the best version of yourself, you need to take care of yourself. A lot of people mask how they're feeling by trying to help other people, and I've been guilty of this too. But if you're not the best version of yourself, it's going to be really hard to take care of the rest of the world. And it's important to give yourself equal time, space, and healing to be the best version of yourself. therapy shouldn't be shamed. And I skipped that. I'm kind of reversing them, but honestly, therapy changed my life. It has offered me so many benefits, and I openly talk about it. I will talk about it on social media and I will defend it. It can be hard to find a therapist that you jive with. So if it doesn't work for you right away, don't give up on it. Sometimes you just need to meet the right therapist. But it's not shameful. It's nothing to be ashamed of. It's amazing. Again, it doesn't have to be everyone. You just need to tell somebody, and lean on your support system. If you don't really have a great support system, I know not everyone does. There are online communities, there's peer supports. And for me, other men too. Talking about men stuff with other men and being open and vulnerable and encouraging them to do the same, very important. Couldn't talk about mental health without social media. So for those of you who don't work in social media, I'm just going to quickly run through this. But social media is based on algorithms, and it's based on things you engage with. So you're not seeing things in chronological order. You're seeing what the platform makes it think you want to see. So if you're always engaging in negative activities, you're going to see negative activities. If you're clicking on posts that are about things that make you mad, that's what you're going to see. If you just did puppies, you'd see puppies all day. That's how it works. It knows a lot about us, and that's how it's able to do this. And it puts us into echo chambers and gives us confirmation bias, right? Like if we're always engaging in one sort of activity and we're associating with people, whatever that activity is, it makes us seem like that's the only thing people are talking about. But really, it's the only thing you're seeing. We're constantly comparing ourselves to others. I mean, the Facebook files that came out and what they know about how it harms young people, especially young girls, it's bad. And too much information and misinformation, right? Like humans, there's a lot going on in this world. There are 7 billion people, and it's impossible to keep up with every single thing happening that's bad in this world or good. But we can't deal with that information all at once. And we can't expect ourselves or other people to as well. Young people, and especially men, learn from our behavior and mimic it. And then this is why I bring up social media, because a few years ago, I almost went through the dark rabbit hole into social media, and it was affecting all parts of my life until my ex-girlfriend at the time just snapped me out of it and asked me, was like, why are you so obsessed with this? It doesn't affect you. I was like, oh my God, right. Like I was talking about it all the time to anybody who would listen. Even on the beginning of my podcast, it was the same thing. I was turning episodes that had nothing to do with something into this thing I read on the internet. And that was like a huge changing point for me. And it made me learn that I have to take care of myself offline so I can go on and use these platforms in a more positive way and in a way that they are more probably intended to do, right? If I see something that I don't like, I don't engage, or I scroll by it, or I go, ooh, I don't like that. Let's take a walk. Let's take a walk and maybe sit with why I don't like that. Is it because it's true? Is it because, I'm reflecting some sort of guilt? Like whatever that reason is, I think about it, and I don't do it by sitting in front of the screen. Social media plays a large part on our mental health these days. And sometimes it just takes a moment for us to step back and be like, it's not always real. It's not always the be all end all. So sometimes before you rage out on the internet, just take a moment. This is probably the most important part. How can you help someone else? That's the question I get the most. I have a friend who's struggling. I have a family member who's struggling. What can I do? Because I took them to the hospital and they weren't really able to help. I can't find a therapist. What can you do as a peer or someone as the word is escaping me, but maybe like a young employee is coming to you as a manager, or that you are above somebody and they're coming for you for guidance. And I referenced this tweet because this tweet changed my life. And this is from Asante. I'm not going to read it for time, but you can kind of take a moment to read that yourself, because it was a light bulb moment again for me. But how can you help? Become better informed, right? We talked about Indigenous issues right off the hop and mental health struggle. This is about race and how that affects mental health. There are a lot of aspects to mental health and mental illness that go into it from different experiences and different lenses. So you need to learn how other people perceive things in order to better help people, right? Like I can't get there and help Asante with this problem because I have no idea what it's like. So I need to be able to recognize that and then hopefully be able to point them in another direction that's going to be able to help. Um, Ask what you can do and how you can help, right? And there's actively listen, and then there's don't compare your own struggle to their struggle to your own life and expectations, right? That's what we always want to do. We want to go, oh, that's not so bad. This one time, this thing happened to me and I turned out okay. No, that's not what we want to hear when someone's asking for help. We want to sit, we want to actively listen, we want to affirm what they're feeling. We want to, verbal cues. Yep, I understand. Yes, I understand how that could make you feel. We don't want to be offering our own conjecture into how they're feeling, even if what they're feeling might not seem rational to you. It's rational to them in that moment. So no judgment, no shame, no offering your own thoughts unless they ask. Sometimes what I do is like, can I offer a piece of advice? And if they say yes, I will. And if they say no, like, okay. But it's really about them. It's not about you in that moment. Guide the person to appropriate supports. That's probably the most important, especially when someone's in crisis. Have you checked out the distress center? I've used the distress center, a great service we have. And other things that you might know about, right? Like if you're worried about somebody, like just have you check this out? Here's a number. Have you thought about calling it? Reintroduce them to those things. Because sometimes in a crisis or when you're overwhelmed, you don't think about that. You're not like, oh, I'm awful, I need to call the number, right? You're not all there sometimes. And sometimes you just, again, I needed the light bulb moment. I needed someone to say something to me so I could kind of like come back to reality and ground myself. Be optimistic, encouraging, and validating. Again, reaffirming what they say. I understand how that you can feel that way. Be optimistic. I know the world's heavy, but sometimes it's like, sometimes saying it, even though it might or may not be true, but like keep going. It can get better. There's hope. Things like that. It's important to not always give in to the pessimism or kind of like the thought patterns that they've put themselves through. Be encouraging. And this is the number one thing. Check in. Don't just wait for people to reach out. So many times people are like, my DMs are open. Message me anytime. I'm here to help. That is wonderful. Thank you so much. But I even myself, I have struggled reaching out because I'm like, I don't want to burden them with my problems. I don't want to, invade their space. They're probably going through something else too. If you're worried about someone, take the time, check in with them. How you doing? How you feeling? What's going on? Do you need anything? Can I get you groceries? If you care, make sure you check in. And that's kind of it. I want to say thank you to Impact Hub Ottawa, NextGen, Eastern Ontario. Thank you so much for hosting this with me and asking me to do so. It was a really great experience. And thank you all for coming and spending some time and space with me and listening to my story and some of my thoughts. I really, really appreciate it. And I'm happy to answer any question. As you can tell, I am a complete open book.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Ryan. I think so many wonderful, lessons and ideas to take in. And I think also so much inspiration just in terms of how a lot of us can process how we deal with mental health, how we can help those around us, our family, our friends, even strangers. And also just a huge thank you to everyone in the chat while you were, I don't know if you were able to see it, but just a huge amount of support and sharing and interaction. So just a huge thank you there. And I think that the biggest takeaway just for me from listening there was, I think this beautiful circle that when you allow yourself to be vulnerable and share how you're feeling and share that story, that in turn often leads to support for you, but also it inspires people around you to open up with their own experiences, which in turn, leads to help and further inspiration. So I just think it's this beautiful cycle that just exemplifies why it's so important to share those kinds of stories. But it's not as easy as that. So thank you so much again for joining us, and thanks for leaving us for loads of time for some exciting questions. So we had a couple here in the chat, which I'll read through first. And folks, if you want to ask your questions out loud, we'll also give you a chance to do that in a second. So the first question we had was from John, and he said that men have a penchant for silence. How do we persuade them to overcome this How do we teach them what to look for and where to reach out?
Great question, John. Thank you. There's two parts to this for me. For me, it's leading by example. As you know, a lot of people, when you tell them something, they might be resistant to it. But what I try to do is, as I share my struggles, I also share the things, that I still can be successful. I can still be happy. I can still have a romantic partner. I can still do all the things that, you might think you couldn't do because you have a mental illness or you're struggling. So leading by example for me is important, and just keep going, keep talking about it. And just hopefully, people get the message. The second part to that is young. You got to start young with them as well. It is unfortunate, but a lot of us as men have been brought up under, the patriarchy and this idea of toxic masculinity where it's not okay. And some people have now that permanently ingrained in kind of how they are. And so if you start young and teach young boys like 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, that it's good, it's okay to talk, it's healthy, and how you experience mental health can affect so much of the rest of the world, right? It's you got to start young and teach them that, and then just hopefully as they move forward, you just continue the movement of them supporting themselves and then supporting other people and continuing the cycle of helping younger people after them. That's what I believe. Obviously, if I had all the answers, I could hopefully do it faster, but yeah, that's kind of what I believe into and how to help men, and especially young men.
Thanks, Ryan, and thanks, John. I know you were sharing a bunch of messages there in the chat. It was great to have you participating, and a quick shout out to some people in the chat saying some big thank yous to Ryan and Gen Next, obviously, for organizing, and Dylan Black saying thank you and how loved you are at the radio station. I just thought it's important to share that it's so great for all of us to be there for coworkers and colleagues and friends. It can often mean so much. So another question here from Sabrina. If you could give one piece of advice to your 12-year-old self, what would it be?
First off, shout out to Dylan, because he's one of my biggest inspirations on getting involved with the community and everything he does. After meeting him, when I was 23, I was like, I want to be like him and help in the way he does. So thank you, Dylan, for being here and always supporting me. If I could go back now, I think the easy answer is, tell your parents. That would be the easiest thing, and start getting help now instead of waiting. That's the easiest thing. But also, as you go into your older years, you're going to experience a lot of different things that are going to really kind of complicate how you view the world. And talk about that too. Talk about that with your therapist. Talk about that with your parents. Don't hide that. Just start talking and find people you can trust and start talking. I think that's for me is the biggest thing, because there were a couple moments I didn't share in this one, but there were moments where I almost slid down an alt-right pipeline on social media. Thankfully, my parents are wonderful and raised me right with empathy. But there was times. So don't hide it. Don't talk about it.
Yeah, that's a really great point there. And thanks for adding that social media part. It's kind of ironic that speaking to your own 12-year-old self, social media wasn't a part of life then, but it definitely is now. So it's great to
beware
that added perspective and be aware for sure. So yeah, a bunch of other questions running in here. So we'll keep going through them. Olivia asks, are there organizations or people you'd recommend connecting with to help volunteer or donate to?
Distress Center, always a great option for volunteering and donating. As we know, there has been a significant rise in demand, and I think they're always looking for people to join that organization, whether it's donating or volunteering to be a call taker. I do believe in supporting DIFD. The organization I also work with, Unsinkable, is working on becoming a not-for-profit. I also like to do what they do because they're on social media talking about it, and that's where most of the young people are, is on social media. So I think that's important. pressure your MPs and your MPPs too. Ask why they aren't funding mental health more. You know, the only way we're going to make change is if we pressure the policymakers, and we as community advocates and can do all we can do. But it really comes down to good policy and people having the political will to make change. That's also something I would recommend doing. And just to also point out there's some great organizations as well that don't specifically mental health, but it's definitely involved. You know, the Wabano Health Center, Minwashi Lodge, Cornerstone Housing for Women, the Canadian Center for Sexual and Gender Diversity, right? They aren't mental health organizations, but what they do impacts mental health. Same with, you know, the mission or organizations like that, right? Like housing is mental health, shelter is mental health, food is mental health. Those are always good organizations as well.
Thanks, Ryan. We've still got 3 or 4 minutes left, so maybe any last couple of questions, you can throw them in there. Perhaps we'll have 5 minutes at the end. Great question here from Carol. Do you think that employees should disclose that they are taking a mental health day to their employers, as many often choose the easier route of saying they're taking a sick day? What do you think about this?
What a great question. And it's still something I struggle with. You know, I'm still not great at taking mental health days. I've only really started to embrace it during the pandemic. I would say, you know best on how your employer would react to that. You know, I would love to say, absolutely tell them and be, you know, be proud, but, you know, be okay with that. But as we know, not every employer, unfortunately, is on that train yet. So you know best. But if you feel comfortable, if you feel your employer does value mental health and you feel you could work up to that, I would absolutely suggest that you say that. And, you know, if there's struggles with your team or you're overworked or overburdened, again, you feel confident that your employer could handle that piece of information, you need to tell them. Workplace mental health is still probably the biggest thing with stigma in society right now. So many people struggle with it. Even mental health advocates, right? It's a dicey area. You don't want to lose your paycheck. So the more of us who do it, the better. But I also completely understand that there is a lot riding on that. So again, if you feel comfortable, I would suggest that. But sometimes I don't want to say it's because mental health. I just want to say I'm not feeling well. They don't need to know all the time either. So, I mean, it's really up to you on how you'd like to handle it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point there, just in terms of it being up to you and just sort of taking ownership for that situation and knowing that it's okay to not be okay, as you've said a few times. And so whatever way best helps you take some time, whether it's telling employees or not necessarily, it's best that you just do what's best for you. We do have one more quick question here, and then I thought I might just open it up quickly if there's anyone for accessibility reasons who wasn't able to type up a question. But Kate asks, what do you do when a friend comes to you looking for someone to listen, but you are just feeling exhausted that day yourself and don't feel like you can truly be there for them at that moment because of your own mental health? What would you recommend you do there? I think it's a really great question.
Another great question. And as a people pleaser, not exactly always great with it, because I will sit there and listen. And to an extent, sometimes helping people does make me feel better in that moment. But sometimes, you know, and again, this is something I've only really started doing in this pandemic, but it's, you know, hey, just so you know, I don't have the capacity or right now, or I know you're hurt, but like, can we chat about this tomorrow? Like, I'm just not in a good headspace. I mean, most people are coming to you probably have some sort of intuition when it comes to mental health, so they'll be quite understanding. I mean, and then sometimes it might be a mutual thing where you both benefit, and they're like, oh, well, I'll listen to you too, right? You do need to set boundaries sometimes. That's one of the things I struggle deeply with social media, because I want to help everybody and I want to talk to everybody and want to be a good person. And then sometimes it's just, I stepped away from my phone. I've just totally left it. I'm like, I can't deal with this. I'm stepping away. So really, to answer your question directly, if you're having trouble with your mental health and someone reaches out, it's creating that boundary if you need to, being like, I can't talk about this right now. Can we talk about it tomorrow? I know you're struggling, but I'm struggling too. I can't help right now. Just be honest, is the best approach, I would say.
Thanks so much, Ryan. And like I said, we're bang on one. I just wanted to, for accessibility reasons, if there's anyone on the call who wasn't able to ask a question in chat, just going to give you 5 seconds there to open up if you have a question. Cool. I just want to say a huge thank you again, Ryan, for joining us and sharing your story, to Gen Next East Ontario for being partners on this event. It was fantastic. And I think from the hub in general, this is our last brown bag lunch of the year. We've had over 40 this year. More than 1,800 people have registered for our events. It's really been a wonderful, wholesome space to discuss interesting ideas, be vulnerable. And so we just want to thank everyone for joining us throughout the year. Obviously, we're there for community and memberships and space bookings. We're always around. But also, if you have a story that you'd like to share, we're always there to help you amplify it. So thank you, everyone, for joining us today for this brown bag lunch, and have a wonderful rest of the year.